Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on Build an Enterprise Agentic AI Platform with AWS Bedrock at Powercor. This session is a level 200 session, and you'll learn how our customers are managing critical infrastructure and operating in a highly regulated environment, has implemented Gen AI for some of their use cases and seeing value in operational efficiency. It's my pleasure to welcome to the stage Roshan Thomas and Peter McTaggart. Please give them a big round of applause.
Hey folks, thank you all for being here. Wouldn't you want your AI to do a bit more than just answer a question? Maybe take a decision on its own, act on your behalf, access a few tools, and carry out some actions on your behalf. Welcome to this session. This is essentially the right place to be if you are interested in any of those items. You'll hear later from Powercor how they have used Amazon Bedrock to implement agentic AI within their enterprise. My name is Roshan Thomas. I'm a senior solutions architect at AWS. And I'll be joined by Peter from Powercor later in the session. At the outset, can I just apologize? We both are from Melbourne. Sorry about the dreadful weather. I think we brought it here. All right. If this is not your first session, I'm sure you would have heard about AI agent at least once today. But I'm going to take a different approach to answering this question. What is an AI agent? So back in 2022, 2023, even even half of 2024, we were used to doing a typical use case of asking a question and getting a response back. And the response was typically based on the data that the large language model, which powers the generative AI, was trained on. However, with the start of AI agents as a trend, what now happens is when you ask the AI agent a question, the AI agent, remember being powered by a large language model, is able to think, it's able to act on your behalf, and then it's able to evaluate your options. So let's take the example of this question that's been asked by me to my AI agent. I want to go on a hike next week. Which is the best day to go for a hike? The agent thinks, you know what, in order to find the answer and answer back to my master, I need to go check on two or maybe three things. Firstly, what's the weather like next week? Is Friday a good day? Looks like it's not raining like today. And maybe check Roshan's schedule or even Peter's schedule so that they can go on a hike together. And then it acts. So it creates a plan first, it executes on that plan, which means it needs to have access to execute those actions that you allow it to, and then it evaluates the output of those actions. As a result, what happens is it gets back, based on the question that was asked, along with the outputs that it has received from the various actions that it has performed, it comes back with an output saying, you know what, Friday might be a good day because I've checked the weather and I've also checked both of your schedules. So have fun. Hopefully you get the idea that AI agents can act autonomously and it can act on your behalf based on the actions that you give it access to. Right, so the next question is, that seems cool. How do I go ahead and implement that within my enterprise and use AWS to do that? Agents for Bedrock or Amazon Bedrock agents was a feature that was released in November of 2023, which provides you the agentic building blocks to carry out these tasks. It gives you the option of selecting your choice of foundation models from leading model providers. It gives you an option to use the knowledge bases so that you can ingest data that is relevant to your enterprise, not the generic data that it's been trained on. It also gives you tools and actions so that you can go ahead and build make calls to APIs that are there within your enterprise. And obviously, you don't want to let an AI agent act in isolation. You really want to be able to observe so that you start to build confidence on the actions that it is taking autonomously. Now, this was a feature that was released in 2023, but what happened at reInvent of last year, December 2024, was we introduced the multi-agent collaboration in preview. Now, the multi-agent collaboration as of March of this year is GA, and the good news is it's available in Sydney, so you can start and build on it. Let's take a typical use case that's common across all enterprises. Look, all enterprises have got employees, and they all have an HR department in some form or shape. Let's say you've got an employee that's wanting to, you're starting to build you're starting to adopt AI agents within the enterprise, and the first use case that comes on board is, let's say, creating a time-off agent. For example, how much time do I have? How much leave do I have? Can you go ahead and book leave for me based on the actions you've given me access to? A next iteration could be, you know what? Once the single agent performing those specific actions is successful, you can maybe give it access to some HR policies, which might be structured documents across your SharePoint maybe, or a file system somewhere, the old X drive or the Z drive. Now, very soon, as you can see, you will start to see that it is tempting to start to introduce a lot more functions within the single agent. And as you grow and as your scope grows, you will be tempted to include as many functions as possible within your single agent. But then what happens is quite logical. The development process gets complicated, right? You have so many more tools to build in. The next thing that happens is the agent, which is powered by a large language model, now starts to get confused as to, hang on, there are very similar looking tools. Remember, it can understand the semantic meaning of the English language. So there could be tools that sound very similar, and it can get confused. And what then happens is the AI agent takes a lot more time to actually come to a conclusion and get a response back to the user. And when it takes a lot more time, it obviously costs you more, which you want to avoid. What do? This is where multi-agent collaboration comes into picture. This is the feature that I spoke about that was announced at reInvent 2024, and generally available in Sydney as of March this year. Multi-agent collaboration works on the concept of creating a supervisor agent, which performs optimized routing between all of these individual specialized agents. It can create a plan, and then execute on that plan on behalf of the user using actions that it has got authorization to use. Meanwhile, it also gives you access to the tools and the actions and its thought process that it's going through to call certain actions. And all of this with Amazon Bedrock's guardrails and security, so that you have control over the output that it generates as well as the actions that it takes. All right, going back to our use case, how does the slide now change? What does the flow now look like? Instead of individual agents that I could build for each of those actions, I can now replace that by an HR agent, which is a supervisor agent and is given one or many single agents, like the time-off agent, the LOA expert, or any other agent that is specialized to do a set of tasks. Now, depending on the question, depending on the question, the supervisor agent then routes the question to the most appropriate agent that's out there that it knows of. Now remember, as it goes along, it could actually go through the process of calling multiple agents It's not just a single flow, it could actually call multiple agents because that's the plan that it has come up with until it is satisfied that it has met the user's question, and the answer to the user's question. So essentially, what the supervisor agent allows you to do is that it becomes the one-stop shop which allows you to perform optimized routing to the most appropriate agent based on the question that you've asked. All right, so at this point in time, let me invite Peter, because Peter will talk to you about how Powercor has implemented multi-agent collaboration in the context of Powercor within the enterprise.
So I'll just start with a little bit of a background about Powercor and the group that I'm in. So Powercor is an electricity distributor business in Victoria, and as Ross said, sorry for the weather that we brought with us. We cover about 65% of the Victorian state, 1.2 million customers, and businesses are serviced by us. And we look after the assets, the poles and wires to distribute electricity down to the users. So we've got quite a lot of assets under management. So 90,000 kilometres of conductors, 800,000 poles, and 80,000 plus distribution substations. So yeah, it's quite a lot of process work, a lot of these sort of workflows that need to look at compliance, asset management, and a range of things. Our team, I've been with Powercor for 10 or 11 years. We've, in various forms, we've worked on sort of digital innovation. That is how we can, finding technologies and applying them to the business to improve the business processes. So we started with introducing cloud computing back in 2015, moved on to big data analytics, did a bit of work around LiDAR analytics processing for vegetation management and asset management. And more recently, in the last 4 to 5 years, we've been focused on computer vision work for asset identification and defect detection on those assets from drone images. And in the last 18 months, we've started to look at what could Gen AI do for the business and how can we apply it in our workplace. And this presentation today is a bit of a story about the journey we went on and the choices we made and the things we did. So the challenge, with all of those assets, we've got millions of images coming in from drones, literally millions, over the course of 6 months or 12 months. We can't manually look at all of these things, and if you've looked at one conductor image, that's one too many in my liking. It gets very, very dull very quickly. We've got a contact center. We've got 1.2 million customers. They're receiving on average 2,000 calls a day, but on peak days, many more. And we've got field workers out there managing, maintaining, constructing networks. So there's something like 16,000 field plans a year, 30,000 sort of bookings for traffic management, drilling, trenching. So how do we enable them to do their work better, same quality as our workloads grow, our customers increase, which they are as well. So we started last year looking at Agentic AI, or Gen AI, I guess, and looking at RAG and document retrieval. So this came out of our drone inspection processes. We wanted to give non-technical users a natural language interface to some of the technical documentation to help them understand what they're seeing in the images. So we built an application, which we call Autofocus, which is a RAG-based application in AWS, using vector databases, a large language model using Bedrock, and using many of the sort of latest techniques we've seen in RAG, hybrid RAG, re-ranking, critics on the output, with a chat-based interface. So that worked quite successfully because we were trying to reduce, I guess, false positives that non-technical users were raising as defects on these images. And that proved out at the end of last year. But what happened at the same time was RAG was popping up all over the business and people were trying to implement it themselves, like the business users, because you can kind of do it if you put your mind to it and you're a technical, capable engineer. So there was a lot of demand being raised for enabling technical users as well as non-technical users to access a variety of kind of reference documentation. So we started to move our autofocus application into a more general deployment where we could load up a lot more documents. But then Agentic AI came onto the scene in the last sort of 6 to 12 months as well. And so we wanted to look at, well, how could we start to leverage our platform that we've built in this RAG application for agent-based work as well. So we started with a simple single kind of agent looking at the voice communications that happens both between our customers and ourselves and also internally. And can we provide better insights by transcribing that and using our knowledge base that we've got stored in our RAG system to deliver checks against compliance for scripts that people have to follow, or to provide feedback to operators on the conversations that they're having, sentiment analysis, those kinds of things from those conversations. So we built a call analytics agent, and it's pretty basic. It's offline as well, and it's batched, so it's nice and easy to manage as a starting point. But ultimately we wanted to implement some of these processes. So we wanted to move to more complex workflows, and which typically would be implemented as some sort of, with some sort of business process tool or workflow tool to try and automate a lot of these tasks. So that's when we started to look at the multi-agent processes and how we could build a system that had like an orchestrating agent that was talking to other multiple agents. And there are a couple of things that we've started looking at on these. The first one is in the contact center, for instance, we get a lot of email inquiries. Can we help the contact center people responding to those with generating responses without them having to do like everything from scratch? And we're now working on work in the field planning. How can we sort of implement some of the compliance processes that we need to do to create our field plans? And this is starting to get really into the real multi-agent work, where we're building pools of agents that have fairly distinct capabilities, and we want to orchestrate that work across the process. And this is work that's in train. So rather than show you kind of diagrams of AWS architecture icons, I thought I'd show you a demo or a couple of demos of this thing in operation to give you a feel for what it looks like. So the first thing we'll look at is this is our RAG application. And so here, I'm just going to ask it, like, how, as a natural, a non-technical user, what's the defect priority for fungus growing on a wooden crossarm? And I'm assuming that most of you understand what RAG does and how it works. This is going away in the background, querying, retrieving documents, querying the LLM to generate the response, presenting the summary of the response, presenting the source documents, allowing the user to click through and look at those. So it's very important that we provide the source documents to the user, because these are good, they're getting better, but we still want the users to validate that they're getting the right information from our LLM. And this is presented in a chat sort of conversational interface, so it knows what you're talking about, and you can ask follow-up questions and drill down into it, like, what if I saw fungus on a steel crossarm? And thankfully it says that's very unlikely. Fungus doesn't really affect steel crossarms, so you're all good. But it still presents you the data that it used to try and come up with that determination. So that's the RAG-based application. And what I'll show you now is the email agent application running in the same interface. So we built this into the same interface to make use of the same infrastructure we'd implemented. And we just, in this case, we're not implementing integration here. The user's going to paste in the email they're getting from a customer. They'll click compose, and as you can see, the email's up there in the input email box. The first thing, and there's a chat interface to this as well, so the first thing that they're going to do is ask to generate a plan. So given this email and what you know and what you can access from our our RAG system, generate a plan for me. And so it creates a plan, having read the email and understanding what's going on. But this plan may not be what the contact center respondent wants to do, so they might modify the plan or want to modify it as well. So they might ask, okay, please add a question in there or to get some feedback from the customer about our response. So that will be sent back to the orchestrator and it will modify the plan, add that line item in, and ready for the user to execute it. There might be some more things. This email's about trimming power lines around trees. So make sure you put some safety information in there about it. And so we'll pass that to the orchestrator, we'll update the plan. And finally, there's a few things in here that probably aren't necessary in the response. So we could ask the agent to deal with that, or we can just delete them out of the plan here and then click execute. And so this will then go away, it will contact the document RAG system and other back-end systems that it has access to retrieve, to generate, and you see the last item in the plan is generate write the email. And so here's the email, it's got those things we asked in it, and then they can take that email and tailor that before they send it off to the customer. So this is designed to really improve the turnaround time on these requests. We'll do another one just because this is cool, and this may not be necessarily agentic, but it's quite a good one. In this case, we've got an email with an attachment, we've pasted in an image here, and the email itself doesn't talk about what the problem is, but the image certainly does. And so if we look on that, we can see this is just sample data as well, so it's not one of our polls. Where there's a leading poll, and so that's passed to the LLM, and it can generate a plan having looked in the image to work out what the issue is. And so you'll see the plan that it comes up with is you're talking about, I need to go and find some information about leaning polls, what should we do? And then we won't modify it, we'll just execute it and it'll produce a response saying, yeah, that probably looks okay, or we'll have someone take a look at it and do something about it if we think it's a problem. So that's a brief sort of demo of the multi-agent collaboration, and there's this orchestration process is what you'll see most of these multi-agent systems do. They have an orchestrator that generates effectively the workflow, which is the plan that's coming out. So what are we getting out of this? So from the document retrieval perspective, we're getting much faster access to documents. So there's a huge demand, and it's just growing and growing in the business to be able to get documents more easily. So just the RAG stuff itself is very, very valuable. The other improvements are things we're targeting once we get some of these into full production, but particularly around the field plans, there's lots of low value work, and so we're looking to take a lot of time out of these processes of people clicking around and looking at maps and looking at images and looking up documentation to really streamline these processes. And we currently have more than 200 users. I'm not exactly sure how many, but it's well more than 200. We're using on this on a daily basis. So just to wrap things up, some of the things that we've learned, it's like the RAG system was, back when we started, wasn't actually, is pretty easy to build a really simple one. It's pretty hard to build a good one, was our experience. So start small, start with something low risk, and I think our example of non-technical users accessing technical documentation was quite low risk, quite focused. Most of our agentic loops, we want to keep people in the loop. We want them to be making the final decision. So a lot of the way that we're thinking about this is that we always want a person in the loop to make a decision, particularly if it affects a customer or affects some part of the network. So that also reduces the risk because they can pick up problems if something's happening in that the agents are generating, and complexity as well, particularly when you're starting out. Users are great. So like this is just standard, keep your users close to your development process because they'll come up with great ideas. There's a lot of hype out there in the market, so everyone's kind of hearing about this stuff and want to get involved, so they're very, very enthusiastic. And I guess finally, and I've seen this repeated at many of the sessions here today, you need a very good evaluation process to work out what you're doing and whether it's improving or whether you're going forward or backwards. Because of the indeterminate nature of LLMs and what they do, it's very important to be able to evaluate as you make changes to ensure that your metrics are improving and you can be confident that what you're doing is making sense. And finally, what's next for us? Well, like I said, there's a huge amount of demand in the organisation for Agentic AI. They really see that it has the potential to really enable us to make a lot of improve efficiency and productivity dramatically. So while we started fairly small in a small corner of the organisation, this is spread right across the management team, and they're very keen to see us pick up and move this out right across the business, which is, I guess, the focus for the next sort of 6 to 12 months at least, if not longer. So thanks very much. I'll hand back to Rosh to wrap up. Thanks, Rosh.
Wow, thank you so much, Peter, for sharing that experience. I think it's going to be really valuable for anybody who is operating in the same industry or in the critical infrastructure space. All right, so summary and key takeaways before we wrap up. Now, look, Gen AI and building AI agents is great, but there is really no shortcut to a strong data foundation. It's absolutely required. There's just no avoiding it. Without good data, you don't have a good AI. So if you're at it where you're starting to build strong data foundations, please keep at it, because that's just going to improve the quality of the work that the AI agents are going to do. The next thing is pick a use case. It does not have to be an elaborate use case. It could be a simple use case, a simple or a complex workflow, depending on the way that you see it and the team structure that you've got. But it's good to get some runs on the board, to get confidence from within your user base, from within your employees, from within the organization. The other thing is make small progress. You could start with, rather than starting right away with an AI agent, you could start with a RAG. As you heard from Powercor, they started with a RAG use case, which then progressed into a single agent use case, and now they're looking at a multi-agent use case as well. So progress and progress progressively, essentially. And look, change is constant. This space is changing rapidly. And please be in touch with your AWS account team. They're here to help and to tell you what's next. So thank you so much for listening. I hope this was of great value to you. We would really appreciate if you could share your feedback with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roshan and Peter. Please do take some time to provide your feedback via AWS Summit app, and please